Hey everybody, this tutorial is going to take you through the steps to make this Nightmare Before Christmas door decoration. My apartment building has an annual contest for Halloween, and the movie poster was my inspiration this year. I suggest watching the tutorial in its entirety before starting for tips on what I learned along the way. I got as many items as I could from the dollar store, and this turned out to be a very affordable project that took roughly 8 hours over the course of a few days to finish. Alright, so let's get started. Your first step is to wrap the front door with black fabric. I used vinyl and would suggest using something similar. The type I found came attached to a white interfacing, which was perfect so I could hot glue on it without ruining our door. On that note, I highly suggest you test a swatch of your fabric beforehand to ensure that you can paint and hot glue without it bleeding through. You essentially want to wrap the door like a giant present, so using duct tape, pull the fabric as taut as possible to get a smooth surface, cutting away any excess. For the lock, handle, and deadbolts, I started by cutting small holes around the outlines, slipping the handle through, then cutting away any excess fabric to, again, make it as flat as possible. Okay, first problem. Our door has a pretty thick seal, so the added fabric stopped the door from fully closing. To fix this, I cut away the fabric from the side, securing it with thin strips of duct tape. Our door frame gives me about a ½ inch leeway for the tape to be hidden when the door is closed. Problem is solved, and now we have our blank canvas. The hill is made from a cardboard base, which I made by Frankensteining some old Amazon boxes together to create one large piece. When you're happy with the placement, secure them all together with duct tape. Use a few pieces of duct tape to hold the full piece of cardboard to the door, and repeat cutting small holes where the door handle and lock go through using an X-Acto knife. Use a pencil to sketch the outline of the hill, and definitely keep a large eraser nearby in case you need to redraw the swirl a few times like I did. I wanted to give the hill some dimension so that it would stand out from the door, so to achieve this, I pulled apart cotton balls and glued them to the cardboard. Now this step does take some time, so put on a binge-worthy show, create a cotton ball reserve, and dive in. To give myself a paintable surface, I paper mache'd over the cotton with tissue paper. Add a little water to some Mod Podge or white glue to make paper mache paste, and be gentle to avoid tearing the paper. Repeat this process on all sections of the hill. You can see here that I left the space around the door handle and the spaces for the pumpkins much more thin. Not videoed, but to trace the moon, I tied a piece of thread to a pencil, held the thread to the center of the door to measure the diameter, then traced the circle onto a few pieces of tissue paper. I covered my work surface in cling wrap, then painted all pieces with paper mache paste. Now my original idea was to make the moon slightly bowed so that I could put string lights behind it, and to achieve that I used some t-shirts and placemats to create a small mound underneath. I'll tell you right now, that did not work. I would have needed many more layers of tissue paper for the dome to hold, and by then I don't even think string lights would have been bright enough to show through all of the layers. So for anyone recreating this, skip the t-shirt mountain and work on a flat surface. Once the tissue paper has dried, use acrylic paint to paint a yellow to white gradient moving inwards towards the center. Once the hill has dried and is ready to paint, start with a medium gray and paint all of the areas of the hill that are illuminated by moonlight. Then paint the rest of the hill in a dark gray and leave both pieces to dry overnight. Moving on to the pumpkins, I found these styrofoam craft pumpkins at the Dollar Tree. Following the seam line, use an X-Acto knife to cut the pumpkin in half. And the stem is apparently attached with a toothpick. That's unexpected, but it's in the way, so either pull it out completely and hot glue the stem back on, or break the toothpick off at the base. Draw a jack-o'-lantern face using a pencil and cut out the pieces with the X-Acto knife. I didn't care for the bright orange color, so using some orange, yellow, and brown acrylic paint, I painted a layer over the entire pumpkin, including any white styrofoam that was showing through. When the hill has dried, add highlight and lowlight streaks to achieve a similar texture effect as seen in the poster. I used a mixture of black and blue for the dark streaks and white for the light. No need to make these perfect, just be sure that the streaks are going in the direction that the hill curves. That should dry pretty quickly, but with the time to wait, I moved back to the pumpkins to add battery tea lights to the inside. Trace the outline of the tea light on the bottom of the pumpkin and cut it out slightly within the outline so that the tea light fits nice and snug. Time to free the hill from the excess cardboard, so using strong scissors and an X-Acto knife, cut away all of the excess. Be very careful with the X-Acto knife here, and maybe give a small cheer once you're finally done with the swirl section. Woo! Oh my god. Then cut away all the excess tissue paper from the moon. Secure the moon to the door with hot glue, and I suggest being a bit more liberal with the glue here than I am to make sure it doesn't fall. For the hill, I started with many loops of duct tape to support the majority of the weight, then used hot glue to secure the edges to make it as flush as possible. The edges did end up popping away from the vinyl, so I would suggest adding more duct tape closer to the edges, or use black electrical tape to tape the perimeter to the vinyl. Secure the pumpkins with hot glue, and it's fine to take a moment to show off your progress so far to your roommate.
Hold on, you haven't even seen the best part about these pumpkins. Do they light up?
Yeah! Oh my god.
Are you ready? Oh my god, that's so fun. Wait for it. There's little lights in them. Ah!
Now for the Jack and Sally silhouette, I find that a grid helps me sketch, so using my iPad, I saved this picture to my photos, edited it, and then with one finger still on the screen for the cropping tool, I took another screenshot so that my reference photo would have the grid. Draw a grid onto a piece of black cardstock. Mine measured out to be 6 by 14 inches, and then copy the silhouette onto the cardstock. Using an X-Acto knife and ensuring that your workspace is protected, I used an old shopping bag, cut out the silhouette. I held the silhouette up to the door and found that Sally's back leg wasn't quite long enough to reach the hill, so I added a small extension. And then, using wooden skewers with the pokey side down, hot glue it to the back of the silhouette. When you're happy with the placement, poke the skewers into the tissue paper at the top of the hill and make any adjustments as needed. I created the stone fences out of craft styrofoam blocks. Start by cutting the blocks in half lengthwise and be prepared for styrofoam fuzz to be everywhere. Then use a pencil to mark the outlines of the stones, and then use the edges of the X-Acto knife to give the stones shape and texture. Once you're happy with the stone shape, paint the whole thing in a medium gray and then use a skinny brush to add black in between the stones. Using a sponge brush, sponge on some light blue and white paint to give the stones some more added texture. I held these pieces up to the door and thought that they were sticking out far too much, so I cut away some more foam from the back. I also found these tiny craft pumpkins at the Dollar Tree, which, after cutting in half and painting on some jack-o'-lantern faces, were the perfect size for the fence posts. I used 20 gauge wire for the posts, and if you don't have wire cutters like me, this wire is pliable enough to break after bending it back and forth a few times. I made the posts roughly 3 to 4 inches long, but note that however long you want them, you need at least half an inch to punch into the foam. I then used 22 gauge wire, which is also breakable after some bending, and wound those pieces lengthwise across the posts. Since the wire I already had was silver, I roughly painted over them in gray to make them a little less shiny. To poke the pumpkins onto the fence, I cut a few slits in the bottom with an X-Acto knife and held the wire steady with some needle nose pliers. Use generous amounts of hot glue to glue the fences to the hill, and then add some extra mini pumpkins to the rest of the hill slope. I decided that the fences blended in far too much with the hills, so I added some more white paint onto the front and the top to give it some more dimension. A few other paint touch-ups later, and there you have it, a Nightmare Before Christmas door, perfect for the Halloween season. Hope you enjoyed!